My name's Rick, and I never thought I'd end up here, typing out my story for strangers on the internet. But sometimes life throws you a curveball so unexpected that you don't know where else to turn. So here I am, on my 50th birthday, fresh off the back of a party that was supposed to celebrate another milestone in my quiet, comfortable life. Instead, it turned out to be the night everything changed. Let me back up. My wife, Karen, and I have been married for 28 years. We were high school sweethearts, the kind of couple that other people looked at and thought, they've got it all figured out. And for a long time, it felt like we did. We've got a 24-year-old daughter, Emily, who's been the apple of my eye since the day she was born. Karen and Emily are like two peas in a pod, same blonde hair, same sharp tongue, and, as I'd later find out, apparently the same taste in men. Emily's been a tennis player since she could hold a racket, and she's had the same coach, Brad, for years. Nice enough guy, I thought. He's been coming around for lessons at our place every week since Emily was in high school. I didn't think twice about him being at the birthday party. He was practically family, always sharing drinks with us after practice and talking shop with Karen about Emily's progress. Nothing unusual, right? Wrong. The night of my party, the house was buzzing with guests. Neighbors, friends, even a couple of my old buddies from work. I was floating around, making small talk, while Karen and Emily were in the kitchen, getting food ready. At one point, I realized I hadn't seen much of them in a while, so I wandered inside. That's when it happened. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear I wasn't. I was just walking in to grab another beer when I heard them whispering. It was Emily's voice that caught my attention first. "Thanks, Mom, for letting me have him, too. I don't know what I'd do without Brad." I froze. My mind did a double take, like I'd misheard or something. But then Karen's voice, calm as anything, chimed in. "Just don't get too attached. He's only good for one thing. Don't start getting ideas about something serious. That's for me." I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. My wife and daughter, sharing the same lover. It was one of those moments where your brain refuses to catch up with reality. I stood there in the hallway, trying to convince myself I was hallucinating, that maybe I'd had one too many beers. But I knew better. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my heart slamming against my chest. And here's the thing, I didn't burst into the kitchen right then and there. Nope. I did something I'm still not sure was brave or cowardly. I backed out of the house, went straight to the backyard, and found Brad. That was when I decided to let my fists do the talking. I'm not usually a violent guy. Never been in a fight in my life, actually. But when I saw Brad standing there, laughing with a couple of my friends like everything was perfectly fine, something in me just snapped. I could still hear Karen and Emily's voices in my head, their calm, matter-of-fact tones as they discussed sharing him like he was a piece of candy they were passing back and forth. That image, that betrayal, was like a fire inside me, and it didn't take long for it to explode. I walked right up to Brad, barely able to keep my composure, and without a word, I swung. I've never felt anything so satisfying as the crunch of his nose under my fist. The entire party went dead silent. People stopped mid-conversation, drinks in hand, staring at me like I'd lost my mind. Brad stumbled back, blood pouring from his face, his hands flying up to his nose like he couldn't believe what had just happened. Hell, I barely believed it. But I didn't stop there. I grabbed the front of his shirt and shoved him back against the patio table, knocking over drinks, sending appetizers flying. "You think I wouldn't find out?" I shouted, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. "You think I wouldn't figure out you've been screwing not just my wife but my daughter, too?" Now, here's where things really got crazy. Karen and Emily, hearing the commotion, came rushing out of the kitchen. Karen had that wide-eyed, deer-in-the-headlights look like she was about to be caught in something but still thought she could wiggle her way out. Emily, on the other hand, just stood there, pale and silent, like she'd been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. "What the hell is wrong with you, Rick?" Karen shrieked, rushing toward me, trying to pull me away from Brad. But she didn't have a chance. The guests had formed a circle around us, like we were gladiators in some twisted arena, watching the whole thing play out. "What's wrong with me?" I yelled, shoving Brad again for good measure, watching as he wiped the blood from his face with his sleeve. "What the hell is wrong with you, Karen? You've been screwing this guy behind my back, and you let Emily get involved, too?" Now, I expected some kind of denial, some attempt at damage control. But what Karen did next? Well, I can't say I was entirely surprised, but it still hit me like a slap to the face. "Rick, calm down. You're overreacting," she snapped, her voice high-pitched and shrill, like she was the one who had the right to be upset. "This isn't what you think it is. You're just misunderstanding the situation." Misunderstanding? I looked around, half expecting someone to tell me this was all some elaborate prank. But no one said a word. I turned to Emily, who was still standing there, her arms crossed, her face a mix of embarrassment and defiance. "And you," I said, pointing at her, my voice dropping lower. "You let this happen, too? You're in on this? With him?" She flinched but didn't say anything, just shifted on her feet like she wanted the ground to open up and swallow her. "Dad, she started, but Karen cut her off, stepping between us, like she was shielding her. "Rick, listen," Karen said, her voice softer now, trying to control the situation, "it's not like that. Brad's been helping Emily. You know how much pressure she's been under with tennis. It's been tough on her, and Brad's been there for her. For both of us, really." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Helping? Helping? That's what you call it. How stupid do you think I am, Karen? "Don't start with the insults, Rick," she snapped back, the shrillness returning. "You think you're some saint. You've been distant for years, more focused on work than this family. You don't even see what's going on around you. And now you're gonna act like you're the victim? Please." I blinked, taken aback. Was she seriously trying to make this my fault? She was cheating on me, with our daughter's tennis coach, no less, and somehow, in her twisted mind, it was because I wasn't paying attention. "And what about Emily?" I said, my voice trembling with anger. "What's your excuse for letting her get involved in this sick game?" That's when Emily finally spoke, her voice quiet, but defiant. "It wasn't like that, Dad. Brad's been helping me, mentally, emotionally. Mom said it was okay. I didn't think." I cut her off, unable to hear any more. Enough. Just, enough. I turned away from them, looking out at the party guests who were still standing there, awkwardly sipping their drinks, pretending like they weren't witnessing the complete destruction of my family. Brad, still clutching his broken nose, finally tried to speak. "Rick, man, I turned back to him, my voice cold. "Get the hell out of here, Brad. Now." He didn't need telling twice. He stumbled toward the gate, his tail between his legs, his face a mess of blood and humiliation. And as I watched him go, the weight of what had just happened finally started to sink in. My wife. My daughter. Both of them, involved with him. How the hell did my life get to this point? As Brad slunk out the gate, holding his nose like he was trying to keep his face from falling apart, I turned back to Karen and Emily. They were both standing there, side by side, but the distance between us felt like miles. Karen was glaring at me, her arms crossed, as if I was the one who had betrayed her. Emily, on the other hand, just looked lost. She hadn't said a word since her weak attempt at justifying everything. It was clear she didn't know how to deal with the mess we were all standing in. "Rick, can we talk about this inside?" Karen said, her voice tight, as if she was trying to regain control of the situation. She glanced around at the guests, most of whom were either awkwardly pretending not to watch or whispering to each other, completely engrossed in the drama unfolding in front of them. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that I didn't even recognize as my own. You want to talk about this? Now? After everything? I shook my head, unable to believe the audacity of the woman standing in front of me. No, Karen. We're way past talking. She rolled her eyes and threw her hands in the air, like I was the unreasonable one. Oh, grow up, Rick. It's not the end of the world. We can deal with this like adults. Stop making a scene. Making a scene. I shot back, my voice rising again. You had an affair with our daughter's coach, our daughter got involved, and you think I'm making a scene? You've lost your damn mind, Karen. By now, the guests were starting to leave. A few of them mumbled half-hearted excuses about early mornings and babysitters, but I didn't care. Let them go. Let them all see how this played out. I wasn't going to sweep this under the rug to save face, and I certainly wasn't going to play the part of the clueless husband any longer. I looked at Emily again, hoping, praying, that maybe she'd say something that would make this make sense. That she'd give me a reason to believe this wasn't as twisted as it seemed. But she just stood there, her face flushed with embarrassment, her eyes darting around like she couldn't even look at me. So this is it? I asked, my voice quieter now, but no less angry. You're both just going to stand there and act like this is normal? Like I'm the one overreacting? Karen sighed, clearly frustrated with my refusal to let her control the narrative. Rick, I didn't plan for this to happen. Things between us have been off for years. You're never around. You're always working. You haven't even noticed what's been going on with Emily's tennis, with her struggles. I stared at her in disbelief. So that's your excuse? You cheated on me because I was working to support this family? Because I wasn't spending enough time obsessing over Emily's tennis career? She rolled her eyes again, like she was dealing with a petulant child. You don't get it. Brad was helping. He was helping both of us. And yes, maybe things went too far, but you're acting like this was some kind of malicious, planned affair. It wasn't. It just happened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It just happened. Karen, do you even hear yourself? You're standing there, admitting to screwing another man, and letting our daughter do the same, and you think it's no big deal because it just happened. Emily, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke again, her voice shaky. Dad, it wasn't like that. Mom didn't. I didn't. I held up my hand to stop her. I don't want to hear it, Emily. I don't care what excuses you have. You're an adult now. You knew what you were doing. She flinched at my words, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not right then. I've given everything to this family, I continued, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. Everything. And this is how you repay me? With lies? With betrayal? Karen stepped forward, her voice suddenly softer, like she thought she could soothe things over. Rick, please. We can work through this. It's not like I don't care about you. It's just, things got complicated. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. That's when I really lost it. Fix this asterisk. I yelled, the words echoing across the now empty backyard. There's no fixing this, Karen. You can't fix this. You slept with another man, and you dragged our daughter into it. What the hell is wrong with you? She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. You know what? I'm done. I'm done with your lies, your manipulations, all of it. You and Emily can pack your things and get out. I want both of you out of my house by the end of the day. For the first time, Karen looked genuinely shocked. Rick, you can't be serious. Where are we supposed to go? I don't care, I said, my voice cold. Go stay with Brad for all I care. But you're not staying here. Not after what you've done. Emily's face crumpled, and she looked like she was about to cry, but Karen just stood there, her eyes narrowing as she realized I wasn't bluffing. This was real. I was really kicking them out. Fine, she snapped, her voice hard and sharp now. If that's how you want to play this, Rick, then fine. We'll leave. But don't think for a second that this is over. You're not the only one with a say in this marriage. I didn't respond. I just turned and walked back into the house, my heart pounding, my mind racing. Part of me was still in shock, still trying to process the fact that my wife and daughter, my family, had betrayed me like this. But another part of me felt a strange sense of relief. Because I was done. Done with the lies. Done with pretending everything was fine. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure, I was done letting Karen control my life. As I walked into the house, slamming the door behind me, the silence was deafening. My heart was still racing, and my hands were shaking, but beneath the adrenaline, there was something else, something that felt disturbingly like peace. I wasn't used to that. For years, I had been living under this cloud of obligation. I worked long hours, paid the bills, and did everything I could to provide for my family. Meanwhile, Karen had been, what? Lying to me? Cheating? And my daughter, my own daughter was in on it? I had always assumed that when things went wrong, it would be something external. Maybe financial issues, maybe health problems. Never this. Never the people closest to me driving the knife in themselves. I could hear them outside, still whispering to each other, probably planning their next move. Honestly, I didn't care what they did. Karen could go spin her lies to someone else. She was a master at it, after all. But what really tore at me was Emily. My little girl, the kid I'd watched grow up, the kid I'd cheered for at every tennis match, every school event, was now just as complicit in this disaster as her mother. I had always thought we were close, sure, she had pulled away a little in her teenage years, but that was normal, right? Now I wasn't sure. Had I missed something? Had I been so focused on work that I didn't see my own daughter slipping away from me? I slumped down on the couch, trying to make sense of it all. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it. But then I saw the name, Karen's mom. Great. She probably already knew. I picked up the phone and answered it, bracing myself for whatever lecture or defense of her daughter was about to come. Rick, her voice was soft, concerned, I just heard from Karen. What's going on? She's saying you threw them out. I sighed, rubbing my eyes with my free hand. Yeah, I threw them out. They deserve it. There was a long pause on the other end. Rick, are you sure this is the right thing to do? I know Karen's made some mistakes, but throwing her and Emily out of their home. Mistakes? I nearly laughed. Mistakes, Kathy. She's been sleeping with Emily's tennis coach. And apparently, Emily's been involved, too. What the hell am I supposed to do with that? The silence stretched on, and for a moment, I thought she might have hung up. Then, quietly, she said, Rick, I don't know what to say. I had no idea. Yeah, well, neither did I. But now I do. And I'm done with it. Are you really going to go through with this? She asked, her voice trembling. Divorce? Kicking them out? I leaned back on the couch, staring up at the ceiling. Kathy, I don't see any other option. I can't trust Karen anymore. And Emily, my voice caught in my throat for a second. I don't even know who she is right now. Rick, don't do something you'll regret. I know this is awful, God, I can't even imagine, but maybe after some time, things can be worked out. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "It's worse, Kathy. It's way worse. And I'm not sure there's anything left to work out." We sat in silence for a while, both of us unsure what to say. Kathy, bless her, was probably trying to figure out how to fix this, but it wasn't her mess to fix. Eventually, she said, "If they come to stay with us, I hope that's okay with you. I know things are rough right now, but I don't want them out on the street." I let out a long breath. "They're your family. Do what you have to do. But don't expect me to change my mind." After hanging up, I felt drained, like all the fight had left me. I sat there, staring blankly at the wall, trying to wrap my head around what life would look like now. No wife. No daughter. And a house that suddenly felt way too big for one person. A few minutes later, I heard the front door open. Karen and Emily were coming inside, but there was no yelling this time. They were quiet, purposeful, like they were trying not to wake a sleeping beast. I watched as they tiptoed up the stairs, probably to grab their things. For a split second, I considered stopping them. Maybe I could take it back, let them stay, pretend we could work through this somehow. But then I remembered the sound of their voices in the kitchen, that casual conversation about sharing a man like he was some kind of accessory. My anger flared back to life, and I stood up, heading toward the stairs. Karen was coming down, a suitcase in hand, her face pale and drawn. Emily was behind her, holding a duffel bag, eyes red but refusing to meet mine. "You both better be out of here by the time I get back," I said, my voice hard. Karen stopped at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at me with something close to pity. "You're really doing this?" "I am," I replied, my jaw tight. She sighed, shaking her head. "You'll regret this, Rick. You'll see. You're throwing away your family for nothing." "For nothing?" I said, my voice cracking with disbelief. "I'm throwing away my family because you already did." She didn't say anything after that. She just walked past me, Emily trailing behind her, as they made their way to the door. I heard the click of it closing behind them, and suddenly, it was just me. Alone in the house that, until a few hours ago, had been my home. The quiet was almost suffocating. After Karen and Emily left, the quiet in the house settled over me like a thick, suffocating blanket. I could hear every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling against the windows. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the door, waiting for the realization of what had just happened to hit me. And when it did, it felt like a punch to the gut. I was alone. Truly, completely alone. My wife of 28 years was gone, and my daughter, my own daughter had left with her. The house that had once been filled with the sounds of family dinners, holiday laughter, and the familiar clatter of Emily's tennis rackets now felt hollow, empty, and lifeless. I tried to tell myself this was for the best. That I had done the right thing by kicking them out. That I couldn't live under the same roof as two people who had betrayed me in ways I never thought possible. But the longer I stood there, the more doubt started creeping in. What if I'd been too rash? What if I could have handled things differently? What if this was a mistake? I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat down at the kitchen table, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. The cold glass felt grounding in my hands, something real to hold on to in a moment where everything else felt so unreal. I took a long drink, but the beer didn't do much to dull the pain that was creeping in from all sides. I thought back to that moment earlier in the day, how I'd walked into the kitchen, overhearing that whispered conversation between Karen and Emily. The shock of hearing their words, the realization that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. It had all happened so fast, but now, in the stillness of the empty house, it played out in slow motion in my head. I couldn't shake the image of Emily, my little girl, laughing with her mother about sharing Brad. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. The two women I loved most in the world, plotting behind my back, treating me like some clueless fool. It stung more than I could put into words. I leaned back in the chair, staring up at the ceiling, wondering where things had gone wrong. Karen and I hadn't always had a perfect marriage, sure. But who did? We had our ups and downs, like anyone else. I'd been working long hours, and maybe I wasn't around as much as I should have been, but I thought we were solid. I thought we were partners. I thought we had something real. But now, looking back, I could see the cracks that had been forming for years, the little signs I'd ignored because I didn't want to believe my marriage was anything less than what I'd built it up to be. I thought of Emily, too. She'd always been a daddy's girl, always looked up to me. But in the past few years, things had shifted. She'd gotten more distant, more secretive. I'd chalked it up to teenage rebellion, to her growing up and finding her own way. I never imagined she'd be complicit in something like this. I never thought she'd betray me like her mother did. As I sat there, the anger that had fueled me earlier began to fade, leaving behind a hollow sadness that seeped into my bones. It was the kind of sadness that comes and you realize your whole life has been built on a foundation that's crumbled beneath you. The kind of sadness that makes you wonder if you'll ever be able to rebuild. I didn't know what to do with it. After a while, I got up and wandered around the house. It was still decorated for the party, balloons tied to chairs, empty glasses on the counter, the remnants of cake on the table. It was almost laughable, in a cruel sort of way. My birthday party, a celebration of 50 years, had turned into the night I lost everything. I went into the living room, where one of the picture frames had fallen off the wall earlier that week. The glass was cracked, but I hadn't gotten around to fixing it. I stared at the photo inside, a picture of me, Karen, and Emily on a vacation years ago. We looked so happy, so carefree. I picked it up, feeling the weight of the broken glass in my hands, and I couldn't help but wonder if that happiness had ever been real, or if it had all been a lie. I thought about calling someone, one of my buddies, maybe, or even my sister, but the idea of explaining everything, of admitting that my wife had been sleeping with our daughter's coach and that my daughter had been part of it too, felt too humiliating. How do you even begin to have that conversation? How do you say out loud that your family, the one you spent years building, has fallen apart in the most grotesque way possible? So, I didn't call anyone. I didn't do anything. I just sat there, alone in the darkening house, with the weight of everything pressing down on me like I'd been buried alive. And then, just as I was about to head to bed, the front door swung open. Karen stormed back in, her face flushed with anger. Emily followed, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "We need to talk," Karen said, her voice sharp. "You can't just throw us out like that, Rick. This is our house, too." I blinked, stunned by the sheer audacity of her words. She was standing there, acting like I was the one who had done something wrong, like I was the one who had betrayed her. I stood up slowly, crossing my arms over my chest. "Karen, you have no right to tell me what I can and can't do in my own house. Not after what you've done." She narrowed her eyes, taking a step closer. "Oh, don't you dare act like some innocent victim here, Rick. You're not exactly blameless. You've been distant, wrapped up in your work, barely paying attention to me or Emily. You think that doesn't have consequences?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, what? This is my fault now. You cheated on me, Karen. You dragged our daughter into it, for God's sake. And you think you get to stand there and act like this is because I work too much? Don't twist this around," she snapped. "I'm not excusing what happened, but maybe if you'd been more present, more involved, things wouldn't have gotten to this point." I stared at her, the anger bubbling back up inside me. "You're unbelievable, you know that. You and Emily have been lying to me for God knows how long, and now you want to make it about my shortcomings. No. I'm not doing this. I'm not letting you turn this around on me." She crossed her arms, matching my stance. "You can kick us out all you want, Rick, but we'll see what happens when the lawyers get involved. I'm not going to let you throw us away like garbage." Emily stood silently behind her, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't say a word. She just looked at me with those big, sad eyes that used to melt my heart. But now they only made the hurt deeper. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice steady. Karen, get out. Both of you. We'll deal with the lawyers, we'll deal with the fallout, but tonight? You're leaving. For a second, I thought she might argue, but then she turned on her heel and walked out, Emily trailing behind her. The door slammed shut behind them, and once again, I was alone. But this time, I felt something different. Relief. After the door slammed shut behind Karen and Emily, the house fell into an even deeper silence than before. But this time, the silence didn't feel quite as suffocating. It was as if their absence had drained some of the poison from the air. I sat back down at the kitchen table, staring at the half-empty beer bottle in front of me, feeling an odd mix of emotions swirling inside. Was I still angry? Of course. The betrayal was like a knife lodged in my chest, one that wasn't going to come out anytime soon. But alongside that anger, there was a new feeling, one that I hadn't expected: relief. Not relief that my family had imploded, obviously. But relief that the charade was over. I didn't have to keep pretending anymore. I didn't have to play the part of the happy husband, oblivious to the deceit festering around me. It was all out in the open now, ugly and painful, but at least it was real. I spent the next few hours aimlessly wandering around the house. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of the life I thought I had, photos on the walls, the tennis rackets by the front door, even the scent of Karen's perfume lingering in the air. But none of it felt real anymore. It all felt like props from some elaborate play, a stage set for a life that had never truly existed. I knew I had to make a plan. I couldn't just sit around waiting for the next blow to fall. Karen had made it clear that she wasn't going to slink away quietly, and there was no doubt in my mind that she'd be talking to a lawyer by tomorrow morning. I needed to get ahead of this, to protect myself and whatever was left of my sanity. The first step was to call my lawyer. I wasn't looking forward to explaining everything, but I knew I had to. I dialed the number, and after a few rings, I was patched through to my lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Diane who had helped me with some real estate contracts in the past. "Rick," she said, her voice calm and professional. "What's going on? You sound tense." "Tense is an understatement," I replied, rubbing my temples. "I need to talk to you about something personal. It's bad. I'm going to need a divorce lawyer." Diane didn't miss a beat. "Okay, let's go through the details. What happened?" And so I told her everything. About the affair, about how Karen and Emily had been involved with the same man, about the confrontation at the party. By the time I was finished, my voice felt raw from reliving it all. Diane was quiet for a moment before responding. "Rick, I'm really sorry you're going through this. It's going to be rough, but we'll get through it. First things first, I'll need to get all the financials in order. Do you have any documentation of what happened, like text messages or emails?" "No," I admitted. "I overheard them talking, but I don't have any hard proof." "That's okay," she said. "We'll build the case with what we have. For now, just keep your head down and don't engage with Karen unless it's absolutely necessary. We'll get the paperwork started, and I'll reach out once I've got everything together." I thanked her and hung up, feeling slightly more in control. At least now, I had a plan. It didn't fix the hole that had been blown through my life, but it was a start. A way to begin clawing my way out of the wreckage. The next few days were a blur. Karen and Emily stayed with Karen's parents, which was fine by me. I didn't want to see either of them right now. I wasn't ready. My lawyer worked fast, and within a week, I had the divorce papers ready to go. I knew Karen wasn't going to make this easy, but at least I could get the ball rolling on ending this nightmare. What hit me the hardest in those quiet moments alone wasn't losing Karen. It was losing Emily. I couldn't stop thinking about how I had failed her. I had raised her to be smart, strong, and independent, but somehow, I'd missed the signs. I didn't see her drifting away from me, didn't see her getting wrapped up in her mother's toxic influence. And now, it felt like she was gone. Not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't know how to reach her anymore. I thought about calling her, trying to patch things up between us, but every time I picked up the phone, I put it down again. I wasn't ready. And, truthfully, I didn't know if I ever would be. She had made her choice, and while I knew she was young and probably being manipulated by Karen, that didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me, too. One night, about 2 weeks after the party, I got a text from Emily. "Dad, can we talk?" My heart sank as I stared at the message. I had been dreading this moment, but I knew it had to happen eventually. I texted back, "Sure. Come over tomorrow." The next day, she showed up at the house, looking pale and nervous. She stood in the doorway, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline, and I could see the guilt written all over her face. "Dad," she started, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Mom said it was okay, and I didn't know how to stop it once it started." I sighed, motioning for her to sit down. "Emily, I love you, but I don't understand how you could let this happen. You're an adult. You knew what you were doing. This wasn't just some mistake you can brush off." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I know, Dad. I know I messed up. I don't know why I went along with it. I guess I didn't want to disappoint Mom. She was so insistent that it was fine, that it would help me with tennis, and I believed her. I should have come to you. I should have told you everything." I leaned forward, looking her in the eyes. "Emily, I would have done anything for you. You didn't need to go to Brad. You didn't need to let this happen. But you did, and now we're here." She wiped her eyes, nodding. "I'm sorry, Dad. I really am." I sat back, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know where we go from here, Emily. I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were. But I do know this, you're my daughter, and I'll always love you. We'll figure this out, but it's going to take time." She nodded, sniffling. "I understand." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything hanging in the air. It wasn't the resolution I'd hoped for, but it was something. A step forward, maybe. Karen never apologized. She never tried to make amends. The divorce dragged on longer than it should have, but eventually, it was finalized. I kept the house, and she moved in with Brad, not that I cared. Let them have each other. They deserved each other. As for me, I started rebuilding. Slowly, piece by piece. It wasn't easy, and some days, the weight of everything still crushed me. But there was a strange kind of freedom in starting over, in knowing that the worst was behind me. I wouldn't say I came out of this unscathed. The scars were deep, and they'd probably never fully heal. But I learned something valuable through all of this, about myself, about what I was willing to tolerate, and about the strength I didn't know I had. And if there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone reading this, it's this: trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. Don't let someone else's lies dictate your reality. Because once the truth comes out, it's always worse than you thought. But once you face it, once you confront the lies and take back control of your life, that's when the healing begins.
Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support and for tuning into my stories on YouTube. Your enthusiasm and feedback mean the world to me. Stay tuned for more exciting tales. Warm regards.